For a long while on Monday night, it sure did look like Texas was about to sweep the regular season series against Baylor. But then the Bears go on a ridiculous run, bring home a senior night dub. And Andy, has Baylor maybe played their way into the 2-seed discussion?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We want to thank you for joining us to get your college hoops content every single day. Seriously, thanks for making us your first listen or watch of the day. Special shout out to all you everyday listeners out there joining us. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Hey, are you kind of the driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? You ever wonder what could be around the next corner? Well, why don't you take the Nissan Rogue or Pathfinder or Armada and go find your next big adventure? Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Andy, it's good to be together. I guess that was the last big Monday of the season because next week it'll be all conference championship stuff. That's hard to believe. It's been a great run. I love those Monday kind of standalone games, man. So good. But that means that today is Tuesday. So, my man, I've got Trivia Tuesday for you if you are ready for the question.
Hit me.
I can't. We're talking digitally. Nice try. I will ask you this question. There are 4 teams in men's Division I that currently are winless in conference play. I want you to just simply name them for me. So,
all right.
Teams winless in conference play, D1, who are they? We'll get to that at the end of the show, folks. Hopefully you can get at least one or a couple. Okay, Andy, let's go down to Waco, Texas, where the Longhorns went down number 11 Baylor. The score here, 93-85 Baylor. Andy, there's so many storylines to talk about, but I'd like to just get into it with asking you a big picture question. Baylor, having won a massive game this weekend and then coming back to beat Texas, are they a shot at a 2 seed? Is that a reality that could be a thing when we get to Selection Sunday?
I think so. I moved them. I think I ranked them 9th this week. I think, in fact, all 3 of us, you, me, and Leaf Tulane, all ranked Baylor 9th, I believe. They're a top 10 team at this point. They're climbing back to that conversation. Obviously, the Kansas win was massive. But for me, what really stands out, and when you talk about great coaches in college basketball, of course, Scott Drew's name is always going to come up. And one of the ways you can tell is when you see how teams respond differently to things that maybe tripped them up earlier in the year. And you think about like the disaster game that Baylor had early in the season against Michigan State, where they just did not show up at all in the first half, and they've played more competitively in the second half, but they didn't like come back in that game. And in this game, they didn't play as poorly in the first half, certainly, as they did in that game, but they were down 14. Like, they were down by a lot, and Texas handled this game early. Max Asmus could not miss, and yet Baylor stayed cool, stayed collected, stayed calm, and went on this massive run in the second half, cut the lead all the way down to whittle it down to nothing, took the lead. And then once they took the lead, that's when it was like really evident how much this team has grown and matured. They did not let up at all. They didn't let off the gas. They were ready to continue to just keep Texas down. They'd taken the lead, and now they were never, ever going to relinquish it again. And I think that attitude adjustment, the veteran experience of guys like Ray J. Dennis, who played great in this game. Of course, Jalen Bridges, absolutely phenomenal performance from him, first career 30-point game. Like, you can look at the individual performances, but to me, it was a team effort of them kind of exercising some of the demons that plagued them earlier in this year. And while I still have concerns about their overall team defense and the ability to win 6 straight games in March.
As well you should, my man.
Totally. But can this team be a 2 seed? Yes, absolutely. Can they be an 100% deserving 2 seed? I think so. I think they've put themselves in a position where they're right in that conversation. North Carolina and Duke are 2 other teams in that conversation. They're going to play each other on Saturday. So that's going to kind of change that dynamic a little bit too. So to me, I'll be interested to see what Illinois does against Purdue. We'll talk about that game later, but I absolutely think Baylor can and maybe has played themselves onto the 2 line, and I think they're capable of making some real noise from that spot as well.
Man, that's wild to think about. Yeah, I mean, as you look at the teams around them, like Lunardi coming into the day, Lunardi's kind of, we've got the 3-1 seeds locked up. But
Mhm.
then you think about these other teams: Arizona, Tennessee, North Carolina, Marquette, Iowa State, Baylor, Duke. I think those are the teams in that 2 and 3 conversation.
Yeah.
And, who knows what's going to happen with Marquette. We got some stuff to talk about with that later
Mhm.
on. Iowa State and Baylor in the same conference. There might be something to that there. You talked about the North Carolina and Duke of it all. What will happen with Creighton in Big East play? So, yeah, I mean, if they just keep winning, who knows? We'll see. So I think they're very much in that position. And it's funny. Let's get back to this game itself, because you talked about Baylor's defense, and that's been a storyline similar to as it was last year with Baylor's defense. But it turned out that was kind of the storyline of this game and how it turned things around, just like South Carolina against Florida on Saturday, how South Carolina's zone defense just stopped the Gators in their tracks, and that game was over. Same thing happens here. Baylor goes to a zone because they weren't doing nothing again, because they started the second half. What was it? 7 of 7 Baylor, I think, started the second half.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because they were just trading buckets at that point because they couldn't stop Texas at all. Max Asmus, I mean, we talk about Jalen Bridges. Max Asmus was on one too. I think he had 33. I'm looking at the box score in real time. But Andy, and then suddenly they switch to this zone, and suddenly things change. It's hilarious to think back on it now, because the note I wrote for myself was Baylor starts second half 7 of 7, but it doesn't matter because they just simply can't stop Texas. But then all of a sudden, Baylor goes on this 11-0 run. All of a sudden, the extended run is 24-4, 33-9. And Andy, it's just off. And I mean, it's ridiculous. Texas goes on a stretch where they do not make a field goal from 13-16 to 13 or 3-30, 13-16 to 13-15. Andy, it was 1 second. They made it. Max Asmus scored at 13-16. He had another field goal at 3:34. In between there, nothing other than free throws for Texas. So great turnaround in this second half for Baylor. And I know they did it at home, and that's the question. What happens in a game like this in a neutral site next week or once we get to the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, and I think the Dylan DeSue injury obviously played a factor as well. He didn't play much in this game because he'd been dealing with a stomach bug coming into the game, but then he gets hurt about the 10:50 mark in the second half, so kind of early into that stretch of game where Texas didn't score. He was holding his left knee. It looked pretty bad in the moment, but what we're hearing afterwards, and we're recording this shortly after the game ended, so it's probably more updates to come, but it sounds like it was a bit of a strain on his knee, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be out too long. Rodney Terry said he's going to be fine. They said they're going to reevaluate him when they get to Austin, hopefully for Texas's sake that DeSue is not out for a long time. But I think what happened with him not being in the game, Texas doesn't have a lot of low post offense. You pack it in with that zone. You force them to shoot over the top. They struggled to do that. I mean, you can see why it was an effective strategy. And right. Scott Drew, drew it up, for lack of a better word, and it had a lot of success. And I think part of that is a bit Texas has these hot and cold streaks. We've seen this from them a little bit. They're not as consistent of a team as they were last year, but this is still a monumental win for Baylor in that quest to be a 2 seed. These are the kind of games you need to win, and these are the kind of games where when you get punched in the mouth, you need to punch back. And earlier in the year, I'm not sure Baylor could have done it, but they did it. They did it on Monday night.
Andy, I thought another key part in this basketball game was the free throw line. Yeah. If you look at Texas's free throws in a vacuum, you're like, oh, really solid job, Longhorns. You got to the line 21 times. You made 16 of them, until you realize that Baylor literally had double the amount of free throw attempts. Yeah. Andy, 42 free throw attempts for the Bears, and they made 34 of them. That's 81% when you shoot 40. I mean, good grief. They made more free throws than I think Virginia has scored in some entire games this year, dude. So that's I don't think they've scored that low. But the point is well taken. That's an insane number. And frankly, a lot of it is because Texas is just out here trucking dudes. Yeah. Like Brock Cunningham. Look, if Steve Sarkisian doesn't reach out to Brock Cunningham to get him to play some football, I don't know what we're doing. And we're missing the mark there in Austin. But, man, really good job of Baylor getting to the free throw line, clawing their way back there, because as you look back at our game notes that you and I are taking as this is going on, Texas is on fire. Texas out to this ridiculously, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, Here we go, dude. And it's crazy to think about. Going back to Dylan Dessou, man, really, really hope he's healthy and the best for him. It was such a shame to see him go down last postseason, and would really like to see him be able to give it a go. Hopefully he's out about as long as Kyle Filipowski was after that court storm. Andy, what do you think about that?
I think that's a good segue into our conversation about Duke, who got the W over NC State in the first game on Big Monday, but they struggled once again to defend a big man on the interior. That has been an issue for them, and we're going to wonder if that could trip the Blue Devils up as they get into the big dance. We're going to talk about that. I want to tell you about today's sponsor, FanDuel. Folks, get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in your pocket if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. We're going to talk about this game to close out the show, but Illinois is favored right now against the Boilermakers of Purdue at home. Can they pull off an upset? Purdue's been susceptible to those road losses. That line right now is 1.5 points in favor of the Illini. If you like that line, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Isaac, going up to the top of Big Monday. Feels like most of the time in this Big Monday series that we've done here on Locked On College Basketball, we lead talking about the Big 12 game, the second game, and we get to the ACC game in the second segment, and that is the case here as we close out Big Monday. Duke wins against NC State. 79-64 was the final score here. Duke kind of managed to keep the Wolfpack at arm's length for the majority of the game, it felt like, but they did struggle, in particular, with DJ Burns. What a huge game from DJ Burns. 27 points. He shot 12 of 19 from the field. He had 5 boards and 4 assists. He had 15 of those points in the first half. He was 7 for 11 in the first half. Just a tremendous performance from Burns. And I think it kind of showed one of the things we have concerns about with Duke, which is that they struggle with low post interior scorers. They struggle with size. They struggle with physicality. And there's a decent amount of that in the ACC, certainly Burns being among them. Of course, Armando Bacot being among them as well. And we have seen Duke struggle with that. And when you get in the NCAA tournament, you're going to face that. As much as college basketball has sort of followed the NBA model and there's more three-point shooting and more floor spacing, there are still back to the basket bigs who dominate in college basketball. Not just
the National Player of the Year.
Right. I mean, it's not just him, but it's also, it's the Drew Timmeys, the Oscar Tshiebwes, the Trace Jackson Davises, currently the Hunter Dickinsons. Like, it is a staple in college basketball still. And Duke struggles to defend them. And while I'm with no discredit to DJ Burns at all, like, they're going to face guys as good or better than DJ Burns. They're not going to get to the national championship without facing somebody like a DJ Burns. It's going to happen. Now, obviously, Duke won this game by 15, so maybe it's nitpicky to say, oh, they can't handle it. They obviously did. But I do have that as a reservation about Duke in terms of, where I'm going to pick them when the brackets come out. Like, that's going to be a big thing I look at of, like, if they're a 3 seed, are there 6 seeds that have big men that could potentially trip them up early? Because I think it's something that is a concern with this team.
I 100% agree with you, Andy. And that, like, as you look back to last year where Flip is the 4 to Derek Lively's 5.
Yeah.
That's a whole different kind of lineup.
Yeah.
I don't want to go mess with Derek Lively at all. What a fresh rookie year he's having in Dallas. It was crazy. But Andy, like, this is, for me, the Achilles heel for Duke this year. And thankfully for them, like, they're shooting really well from deep, and a lot of times that can offset it. And Flip is obviously mobile enough and is shooting much better from deep this year to be able to bring guys out. But if not, I mean, you talked about Armando Bacot in the first Duke Carolina game this year. Bacot, 25 points, 10 boards, 10 of 13 field goals, 5 assists, 2 turnovers. So very similar to what DJ Burns did on Monday night. Efficient shooting, good facilitation, and like, if others are able to exploit that, Duke's going to have to win elsewhere. And I think that's the thing. Now they can, because you got like Jared McCain is just silly, man. I love watching that dude play. I know Caleb Foster's out right now, but Sean Stewart's starting to come along a little bit off the bench for Coach Scheyer. And so they're just going to, when Duke comes up against a DJ Burns, a Hunter Dickinson, like you said, a Zach Edey, and Armando Bacot. They're going to have a great game plan to be able to win elsewhere. And I think that's the key that we got to watch for.
Yeah, and they rebounded great in this game, and I think that's a part of it too. They crashed the offensive glass at an elite level in this game. They had 14 offensive rebounds at halftime. That is insane. They finished with 19, but they had 14 at halftime. NC State had 16 total rebounds. That is the dominance that Duke had on the offensive glass. So it's not like it's not like they can't push people around. It's not like they can't be physical. They just struggle to defend those bigger guys. They don't have a Lively who can erase shots at the rim and do what he was capable of doing. So I do think that they're not going to just get out-muscled by every team that they play. That's not the situation. It's a specific type of player that I think can really trip them up. It's just also a type of player that's not that uncommon. And like you said, Bacot dominated the last time out, and that sets up this huge battle on Saturday. It's a battle for first place. I mean, it's as plain as simple. It's a battle for first place between Duke and Carolina on Saturday. It's going to be a blast.
And North Carolina still has to take care of Notre Dame at home on tonight, Tuesday, and we'll talk about that more later. But looking at the AC standings, win or lose for North Carolina, this game is a game for first place. And so, and interestingly, some of that is how Duke chooses to defend. Like in that first game that we talked about, they really went all in on stopping RJ Davis. So that's part of it. I'm curious to see if they go all in on shutting down Armando Bacot. Could they do something like that? We'll obviously talk about that more as we get into the weekend. Andy, we got to get to a little bit of sad news here, moving on past Duke and NC State. We learned on Monday, Tyler Kolek had missed Marquette's game against Creighton over the weekend, and then Marquette officially announced that, and this was kind of odd to me because there's no mandated injury reporting, but Marquette announced on Monday that Tyler Kolek will miss the final 2 games of the regular season for Marquette. Those are critical games, hosting UConn and at Xavier. I mean, that's Matt. Yeah. That obviously it's tough, the UConn game, but going on the road to Xavier, man. So he's going to be reevaluated prior to the Big East tournament. And I mean, that's no guarantee of anything. That's just saying we're going to look at it again at that point. Andy, you talked about it yesterday on the Monday show that Marquette had just 7 assists as a team against Creighton, while Kolek averages more than that per game. And so, Andy, I mean, obviously there's the regular season stuff to talk about because that's going to impact seeding. We're talking about Marquette as a possible 2 seed. You hate to think about it this way, but for Baylor, they're like, is that more into a 2 seed? I mean, injuries are part of the game, and I hate that it's that way, but it is that way. And so what does this mean for you, for Marquette in the short and long term?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you look at Marquette may have lost to Creighton without Tyler Kolek. Now they didn't have Kolek. They also did not have Oso Ighodaro. So the odds of them winning that game were pretty slim. They may
expect him to be back, we should say. That was just illness, and that's good.
Yeah, Oso is going to be fine, but they may have lost to Creighton either way. But now they definitively lost. They also probably would have lost to UConn with Tyler Kolek, like this upcoming game. Now they're more likely to lose to UConn. Obviously, that could be changed. They could win. That would be a huge, huge victory for Shaka Smart. But if they lose to UConn, it's not, they lost to UConn because they didn't have Tyler Kolek. They might have lost to him anyway. But the Xavier game is where it's going to get really interesting. Xavier's not particularly great. They're kind of off the bubble now. They've struggled in picking up some of those marquee wins. But Sean Miller's a very good coach, and he's got really good guards and really good guard play. And I could see them making life really miserable for Marquette, especially if they're missing Kolek. So I do think that, if you're Baylor, you're feeling pretty good about this. You might be thinking, okay, they may have lost to Creighton and UConn anyway, but what if they also lose to Xavier? I mean, if they lose that game, they'll be on a 3-game losing streak. They will be out of the 2-seed conversation at that point. They'll be in the borderline 4-seed territory with that Xavier loss. Now, if Kolek comes back, gets healthy, they go win the Big East or go to the championship game, that probably erases some of this negativity, but they need Kolek back, and oblique injuries don't magically heal. These things take time, and I think it's smart that they're sitting him out. I think the odds of, if you play him against UConn, he re-aggravates it, misses the whole Big East tournament, and you still lose to UConn, that's the worst case scenario. I'd rather sit him for this game, hope you can survive against Xavier, and have him fully healthy for the Big East tournament. I'm assuming that's what they're banking on, but it is, again, oblique injuries don't magically go away. This could still be a thing that's impacting him. Could impact whether he even plays in the Big East tournament, but certainly will be impacting him on the floor if he does play.
That's the wisest play for Marquette, Andy. You're absolutely right. Shaka Smart and his coaching staff are very smart to make this choice. And it just stinks because Marquette had been on this great run. Marquette, we talked about Dylan DeSue being out last year in the tournament. Same thing with Tyler Kolek being injured. And so I hate it. We talk about it all the time. We hate it when these are the things that impact wins and losses, but it is part of the sport. Really quickly before we move on, speaking of Tyler Kolek, the Cousy Award finalists for the best point guard in the nation were announced on Monday. Tyler Kolek is one of them, along with Big East mate UConn's Tristan Newton, Alabama's Mark Sears, Houston's Jamal Shed, and Purdue's Braden Smith. And so I think those are all great choices. We can nitpick and tuck and argue at those, but Andy, I all 5 of these dudes are incredibly deserving in my very humble opinion.
Yeah, hard to find a lot of fault with this. There's certainly some guys that you could argue should be in there, but none of these guys don't deserve to be here.
Yeah. And for some of those that you think should be there, wait till the shooting guard finalist comes out before we get all right, Andy, speaking of Braden Smith, Purdue is not favored on the road tonight against Illinois. Final road game of the regular season. Could Matt Painter's team take another Big Ten road loss before the tournament? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you this episode's brought to you by Nissan. Hey, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little further? Do you ever wonder what's just around that next corner? Maybe some great adventures. Well, our friends at Nissan have a great lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventures to the next level. How about the 2024 Nissan Rogue? It's perfect for city drives or great escapes. You need something? Call on the class exclusive built-in Google Assistant, because gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and the Google Play Store, they're built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Or how about the one the Shade family would choose, the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder? It's got room for up to 8, expansive cargo capacity, I love that, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing capacity, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue or Pathfinder or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Andy, Tuesdays have been delivering Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday lately, and honestly, Wednesdays have as well. But man, this Tuesday is no different. We got several games we want to look at involving ranked teams. We got several bubble games. We want to give you a bubble rooting guide if you're a bubble team. But Andy, first, we want to talk about this massive Big Ten game. Number 3, Purdue is at number 12, Illinois tonight, 7 Eastern. But of course, it's on Peacock. Thankfully, shouts to my mother-in-law. I've got her login. FanDuel has this game. Illinois -1.5. Andy, right now in the Big Ten standings, Illinois is 2 games back of Purdue. They're not mathematically eliminated, and winning this game would go a long way to maybe they could get a share of the regular season title. What do you think is going to happen?
I would be very surprised if Illinois got a share of the regular season title. However, that's mostly because I don't think Purdue would lose to Illinois and then also lose to Wisconsin, which is their last game of the season. I do think it's possible Illinois pulls the upset. We have seen Purdue be susceptible to road losses in conference play. It happened way back in December against Northwestern. Like this has been a trend for Purdue, is losing some of these tougher road games in the Big Ten. And Illinois is really good, and they have the size. Coleman Hawkins is fantastic. They have the ability to make life uncomfortable for Edey, get him out in switches and potentially make things harder for him. I think that Illinois is a great offensive team. They're a really good scoring team. I think there's a lot of things that could go in the Illini's favor in this one. So I wouldn't be shocked if Illinois pulled the upset. They're wanting to get into that top 10 conversation. They're wanting to get into that 2-seed conversation. Right. I don't know that a win here automatically puts them in the 2-seed conversation, but it gets them a heck of a lot closer than they are right now. That's for sure. And I think this is a team that's certainly capable of pulling off this win. But Purdue, they don't want to go through any late season struggles. They don't need losses in March. Matt Painter knows what the reputation is. And so I think they're going to find a way to game plan their way into trying to get a victory here. But I think this is going to be a really close one. I think if I was picking, I'd probably say Purdue's going to win, but it would not shock me if Illinois pulled off an upset here either.
Well, and let me remind us of just something that was happening. I don't know, maybe the last time these two teams got together, Purdue, they won by 5, 83-78. But Andy, do you remember who did not play in that basketball game?
I'm guessing it was Terrence Shannon.
You would be absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Is that enough of a factor to turn the tide?
Yeah, he's pretty good.
He's a pretty stinking good basketball player. Absolutely, that could be enough to turn the tide in this game, especially at home. You know what? I didn't look to see. Is Illinois' last regular season game? Is it also? No, it's on the road. So this is senior night for Illinois. Those kind of things matter.
Yeah, they
so
do.
Here's what I'm always trying to gauge, Andy, on senior night. Is it a good thing for you, or do you let the emotion of it take you too far, and then you play kind of out of control and wild? Like, that's what I'm going to be watching for, how Illinois composes themselves and is able to play that way. Meanwhile, can Purdue, while the road is tough to go play on, can they take advantage of maybe an overly emotional Illinois team early? Those kind of things are always at factor on senior night.
Yep, 100%. College basketball is fun that way. You got these extra kind of things that make a difference, make an impact. I've certainly seen teams struggle on senior night exactly because of that. So I could see that being a situation here with the Illini.
100%. Andy, we got to go to some ranked teams on the road. Let me give them to you. There are three of them tonight. Number 16, Alabama at Florida, 7 Eastern on ESPN. FanDuel has it Florida -1.5. Obviously, both these teams coming over tough losses this weekend, so somebody's going to be on a 2-game losing skid. Yeah. 13 Auburn at Mizzou, 9 Eastern on SEC Network. FanDuel has it Auburn -12.5. And also 20 in the Mountain West Conference, 21 San Diego State is at UNLV. Well, they've been coming along, my dude. 11 Eastern. Oh gosh, I need a nap. CBS Sports Network. FanDuel has it Aztecs -2.5. Andy, what do you like out of that trio?
I think Florida's going to upset Alabama. And I don't know how much of an upset that it realistically is. I know Alabama's higher in the SEC standings. I know Alabama's ranked and Florida's currently not, having just fallen out of the rankings. But I think Florida's going to win this game. I think they are more balanced than Alabama, who obviously struggles on the defensive end of the floor. I think Florida has enough talented guard play with Clayton and Richard and Kugel and Poland and everybody to potentially make life really difficult on Alabama, again, mostly on the defensive end of the floor. And I think they have enough. I think Florida has enough defensive chops to at least slow down Alabama. You don't need to completely stop Alabama from scoring. You just need to score more points than them. If they're going to let you score 85, all you need to do is hold Alabama to 84. And I think
is that how this works, Andy?
Yeah, Todd Golden is a very, very analytical guy. So I think he's got that math down just perfectly.
So all I need is one more point and I win. That's what you're telling me. This is bonkers. Yeah, Andy. And the funny thing is, because Florida's favored, if they win, it's not an upset in terms of the betting lines, right? Mm-hmm. But certainly in terms of rankings and stuff like that, it would be. So really interested to see. Look, to me, it's the Mountain West game. With all due respect to Mizzou, who's just not having a good basketball season in any way, shape, or form. It's this Mountain West game that I'm really, really curious to see what's going to happen with it, because as you look at San Diego State, they're cruising right along. Haven't lost since that loss to Utah State. They've won 4 of 5. But as for UNLV, Andy, what is it up to now? Is it 5 out? They've won 9 out of their last 10 games. UNLV has.
Yeah, they've been on red hot.
I mean, if they could win this game at home, by the way, it could mean massive things for the Running Rebels. So if you can get a nap in and stay up for that one, folks, I would highly encourage you to do so. Andy, a couple of other ranked games, 2 of them. Notre Dame at North Carolina. That one's 7 Eastern on ACC Network. FanDuel has it Carolina by 15.5. By the way, don't laugh at this one, folks. All of a sudden, Notre Dame has won 5 of their last 6. And then, oh boy, the Kansas battle. Sunflower State, is that Kansas? Anyway, Kansas State at number 14, Kansas, 9 Eastern on ESPN. FanDuel has it Kansas by 10.5. Andy, I mean, we expect North Carolina to win despite Notre Dame's run here. 4 of those 5 wins have all been at home. And so we're expecting North Carolina to win. Crazier things have happened, but I think the big talking here is the Kansas game.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas needs this so badly. They've struggled this last week. They've struggled throughout the season. Bill Self has more losses in conference play than he's ever taken in his time at Kansas. And Kansas State needs it too. I mean, their loss to Cincinnati over the weekend kind of really put a big damper on their bubble hopes, which were already pretty thin. But really good way to get yourself back on the bubble. Go beat Kansas at home. go pick up a win at Allen Fieldhouse. That really, really helps. And so I think Jerome Tang is going to have this team ready to roll. They're going to come in all guns a-blazing. I think this is going to be a much closer game than 10.5 points. I'll tell you that right now. I do think Kansas, especially if they're fully healthy, which we're assuming they're going to be, I think Kansas is going to win this game. I just don't see how Bill Self lets this team lose another game at home. But I would not be surprised if Kansas State gives them literally everything that they got.
All right, Andy says K-State covering. I like to hear that. Andy, here's the thing. It's kind of like what we talked about with Michigan State the other day. You can't lose games you're supposed to win before a game you're supposed to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas goes to Houston Saturday to wrap up the regular season. If they lose this game tonight and then at Houston, that's a 4-game losing streak to wrap up Big 12 play. Man, they could not be doing that. Andy, let me rattle off these this bubble game rooting guide, and then you get us out. Actually, we got the Tuesday trivia. You do the bubble game rooting guide because I want to do Tuesday trivia.
Sounds good. We got a handful of games that if you are a fan of a team that is on the bubble, I'm going to tell you who you want to root for to win this game because you want the other team to lose to hurt their bubble chances. We start in the ACC, Syracuse at Clemson, 7 Eastern time on ESPN2. Clemson is favored, but you are rooting for Syracuse to pull off the upset there. Staying in the ACC, Georgia Tech at Wake Forest, 9 Eastern time on the ACC network. Wake Forest favored by 13.5, but once again, you are rooting for Damon Stoudemire and the Yellow Jackets to get the upset there. Florida State at Pitt, 9 Eastern on ESPN2. Pitt is favored. Florida State is who you want to win. Now, there are a couple non-ACC bubble games that we're going to talk about here. 2 of them going on in the Big 12. Texas Tech at Oklahoma State, 8 Eastern time on ESPN+. Tech is favored, but you're rooting for Oklahoma State. Cincinnati at Oklahoma. That one is also at 8 Eastern time on ESPN+. FanDuel favors Oklahoma, and that is who you are rooting for in this one. We want Cincinnati to lose to keep them off of the bubble. Nevada at Boise State, 11 Eastern time, another late one in the Mountain West. That's on FS1. Boise State is favored, and they are who you want to win. They are more safely in the field of 68 right now. And then closing it out with an SEC game, Ole Miss going on the road at Georgia, 7 Eastern time on the SEC network. FanDuel favors Georgia by 1.5. That is what you all want right there. If Ole Miss takes another loss, good chance that Chris Beard's team is off the bubble and out of consideration, barring some really big run in the SEC tournament.
All right, Andy, Tuesday trivia. 4 D1 teams are winless in conference play. Who are they? Let me give you 2 hints. One of these teams we literally have talked about in this segment. Another of these teams you and I talked about off air before we started recording. Let's see.
Those are the 2 that I knew. Well, 2 of the 3 that I know very confidently.
Okay.
Missouri's one of them.
Yep. 0-16 in the SEC.
Yeah, Missouri's one of them. I think there's 2 Power 6 ones. I believe the other one would be DePaul.
That's right. 0-18 in the Big East.
DePaul and Mizzou, 2 Power 6 teams, don't have a win in conference play. The other one I know is Pacific because we talked about them prior to the recording.
0-16 in the West Coast Conference.
Yep, and Leonard Perry lost his job on Monday evening, and that is kind of understandable. They have struggled. Pacific's not a fun place to try to coach, but man, they have not been good. I have a guess for the last one because I know it's not Detroit, and I know it's not Mississippi Valley State.
That's right. That's
it's
good, man. Nice.
I think it's a more obscure team.
It is.
And I'm pretty sure I know the answer because my buddy works at this school. So that's a little bit of cheating, but I'm pretty sure it's Cal Poly. Is that right?
Oh, my word, dude. Yes. You went 4 for 4, Andy.
4 for 4.
Way to go. Yes, Cal Poly is 0-18 in the Big West.
Also let their coach go, by the way.
It's a good thing to probably do if your team goes that bad. Although I don't think that will happen at Mizzou. We'll keep tabs on that. Andy, get us out of here.
Well, folks, I want to thank you all so much for making the show your first listen and your first watch of the day, or your first watch for those of you who listen on YouTube or watch on YouTube and listen. We appreciate that as well. We got a fantastic rest of the week coming your way. We're going to recap these games on Wednesday. We're going to get you all ready for the rest of the week. In the start of conference tournaments, we are almost there. As we get into next week, we're going to get into the thick of conference tournament season, then, of course, Selection Sunday, and then boom, we are in it to win it from there on out. I'm very, very excited to be getting into the meat of the college basketball season. Want to thank all of you again for listening. And of course, apologies to the Lawyer family since we talked about Braden Smith today, right? Let's go Wildcats, especially those ones in Manhattan, Kansas. And until tomorrow, peace.